Absolutely do not provoke this father. If anyone dares to harm his daughter, he will make that person believe that death is far better than living. This is a corrosive liquid that directly affects the nerves. I can play with you all night. At last, do you want to tell me who your accomplice is? Paul Kersey is an emergency room surgeon in Chicago. He is a very capable doctor, who has spent his life saving lives. Paul lives happily with his wife and daughter. His wife Lucy is a gentle person, who wholeheartedly takes care of her family. And his daughter, Jordan, is beautiful, good at both sports and studies. However, an unexpected event turns Paul's life upside down. That day, to congratulate Jordan on passing the exam to the prestigious university, Paul takes his family to a restaurant. After a happy meal, Paul plans to take his wife and daughter home. The valet named Miguel comes to help Paul get the car. Paul is very generous, he tips Miguel some money. Miguel is sure that Paul must be rich. With bad intentions, Miguel photographs their home address. One night, Paul's family is about to go out for dinner. When they are ready to go, Paul receives a phone call from the hospital, informing him that he has an urgent surgery. Paul has no choice but to leave his wife and daughter at home. Not long after Paul left, a group of thugs break into their house. Lucy discovers that the window is opened in an unusual way. Then she finds many muddy footprints on the floor. She realizes that strangers had broken into her house. Lucy panics and calls her daughter upstairs. But it's too late, Jordan was controlled by the thugs. The leader of the thugs threatens Lucy that their goal is money. If she's obedient and does what they say, they won't harm her and her daughter. Lucy has to agree with them. The leader leads Lucy upstairs to get money. However, one of the three thugs finds Jordan very beautiful and lusts for her. He intends to violate their commitment. Jordan can't accept being raped, so she hurriedly reaches for the knife, slashing the perverted thug's face. In a panic, the thug takes off his mask. At this moment, the leader and Lucy go downstairs. Seeing her daughter being bullied, Lucy immediately grabs a pot of boiling water on the table and throws it at that thug. This action makes the thugs extremely angry. Paul hears that an unfortunate incident has happened at his house. His wife was shot and seriously injured. Although she was given first aid, she could not survive. Paul is heartbroken to see his wife for the last time. His daughter was seriously wounded too. Fortunately, her life was saved, but she fell into a deep coma. Paul attends Lucy's funeral with her family in Texas. As Paul and Lucy's father Ben leave, they encounter a group of marauding poachers. Ben grasps a lever-action rifle and shoots at them. Paul looks at the thieves in surprise. Ben tells Paul that the police only show up after everything happened. So if the police can't help, he has to do it himself. After hearing that, Paul falls into contemplation. Back home, Paul blames himself for not protecting his wife, and not fulfilling his responsibilities as a man. Since that tragic incident, Paul has not been able to sleep at all. He even has to take sleeping pills to fall asleep. Paul calls the police who are in charge of the case. However, the police say they have no new information, making Paul become completely depressed. He has to see the psychologist. Finally, Paul cannot just sit by. He personally drives to the police station to question them about the case. The police chief tells him, now they only know that the culprit is a group of 3 criminals. Furthermore, they are all newbies. Apart from the above, they didn't find any useful clues. The police chief also adds that the policemen are not at a loose end, they really tried their best. Paul becomes frustrated with the lack of police progress on the case. He is determined to avenge his wife and daughter by himself. One night, on the way home, he finds 2 men harassing a woman. Paul tries to intervene, but he is kicked and punched to the ground by the 2 scoundrels. This makes Paul realize that he needs a weapon to protect himself. One day, Paul sees an advertisement for a retail gun store on TV. The ad emphasizes that laws are meaningless to criminals. When danger comes to us every second, the police are away from us for a minute. The next day, Paul visits the weapons store in this advertisement. There are various kinds of guns and other weapons here. Listening to the introduction of the saleswoman, Paul is quite interested, until he sees the surveillance cameras placed in the store. He hesitates a bit. He says that he wants to think more carefully about it, and will come back later. One day, Paul receives an operation. The patient is a thug. While the medical staffs are moving him, suddenly a pistol falls off the thug's body. Paul pretends not to see the pistol. He kicks it under the bed. Then, when no one notices, Paul hides the pistol inside his pants. Next, Paul learns how to assemble and use firearms online. In the following days, he practices shooting very hard. When he feels that his shooting skill is fine, Paul goes to the slums to look for clues. That day, while wandering around the streets, Paul accidentally witnesses a carjacking. Once again, he loudly asks them to stop. But the criminals not only do not stop but also pull out their guns and shoot at Paul. However, the whole incident is filmed by a passerby. The police quickly arrive at the scene. Paul wearing a hooded hoodie appears in the video. Not long after, the video goes viral on the internet. A lot of people comment enthusiastically about it. The rescued victim is grateful for Paul's act of bravery. Paul's supporters consider him a hero of the city. Meanwhile, opponents say that they should call him Grim Reaper of Chicago. Later on, a young boy is taken to the hospital with a gunshot wound to the leg. The boy reveals that an addict shot him. He even forced the boy to help him deal in drugs. Hearing that, Paul immediately goes to find that drug dealer. Right now, the drug dealer and his accomplices are rudely commenting about a woman on the street. Paul calmly approaches the drug dealer and shoots him to death. Grim Reaper appears again. News, TV, and radio are hotly talking about whether Paul's method is right or wrong. Paul watches a program about himself on TV. He is extremely excited. Later at the hospital, Paul receives another critically wounded patient. Coincidentally, this patient is Miguel, the valet he met before. Paul sees his lost watch on Miguel's hand. Although the doctors try their best, Miguel still cannot overcome. Paul steals Miguel's phone from his pocket, unlocks the phone with Miguel's fingerprint. Paul then learns an important clue from Miguel's phone. Miguel bought the watch from a store in Black Market. After that, Paul goes to that store alone. At first, Paul just wants to get his lost items back, then relies on them to find clues. The owner, Ponytail, recognizes that Paul comes here for bad intentions. Ponytail silently messages Fish, one of the criminals who killed Lucy. After sending the message, he is about to get the gun. But Paul is faster. He immediately stabs Ponytail in the hand. Paul demands his family's belongings back at gunpoint. Fish quietly arrives at the store, aims his weapon at Paul. Paul sees him through the surveillance camera. Seeing Fish, Paul quickly dodges. As a result, Fish erroneously kills Ponytail with a single shot to the head. Fish doesn't spare Paul, but he steps on a pool of blood and slips. Paul seizes the opportunity. He grabs the guitar to hit Fish in the face, then pushes the shelf down on top of him. Paul looks through the surveillance camera, detects Fish's location. When Fish isn't paying attention, Paul quickly shoots him in the leg. Fish falls down. Paul steps on the wound on Fish's leg, forcing him to reveal the whereabouts of his accomplices. Fish can't stand it and has to tell the name and address of one of his accomplices. While Paul isn't paying attention, Fish kicks him to the ground. He immediately picks up the gun and slowly approaches Paul. Fish complacently points the gun at Paul. But suddenly, the bowling ball falls onto Fish's head. Based on the information that Fish gave him, Paul finds Joe, who had bad intentions with his daughter, at his auto body shop. Seeing the knife scar on Joe's face, Paul can't hold back his anger. He chooses the biggest wrench and madly hits Joe. After a while, Joe wakes up and finds himself tied up. As a surgeon, Paul had already prepared enough equipment to torture him. He knows how to make one's life worse than death. He cuts Joe's sciatic nerve with a scalpel and pours brake fluid into the open wound. From a medical perspective, this is the most painful experience that people can endure. Just tell me what I want to know. Who else was there? Joe can't stand this terrible torture. He divulges that the third attacker is Knox. Joe begs Paul to spare him, but Paul only says that whoever dares to harm his daughter must die. Paul doesn't need to find Knox because Knox contacts him first. Knox calls Paul, arranging to meet in a nightclub. That night, Paul goes to the rendezvous point. Both of them want to put the other to death. Paul falls into the trap. Knox suddenly ambushes, shooting Paul in the shoulder. However, Knox also gets a bullet in the stomach. In this battle, they are all injured. Seeing that the situation is not good, Paul quickly leaves. Back home, Paul tries to bear the pain and heals himself, while Knox arrives at the hospital, posing as a bystander injured in the gunfight. He tells the police that the person who caused the gunfight is Paul. But the police have no evidence, so they can't arrest Paul. At the same time, the hospital calls to tell Paul that Jordan has exited her coma and regained consciousness. Paul tells his daughter that her mother had passed away. They lean their heads against each other and burst into tears. A week later, Paul leaves the hospital with Jordan. They encounter Knox in the elevator. Paul and Knox say a few simple sentences to each other, but they all imply death. Only Jordan doesn't understand. Looks like another fierce battle is about to happen. After taking his daughter home, Paul returns to the retail gun store to legally purchase weapons. As expected, Knox and two accomplices attack Paul's home at night. But Paul had prepared in advance. He hides Jordan under the stairs, and she calls the police. And he hides in a corner waiting for the enemies to come. After a thug enters the bedroom, he immediately fires consecutive shots at the bed. He flips the blanket over and realizes that he had been tricked. Paul hides in the toilet, turns on the faucet. The thug thinks Paul is taking a shower, so comes to the bathroom. Hearing the gunfire, the other thug quickly runs upstairs. After killing the two accomplices, Paul goes downstairs to find Knox. Stepping down to the basement. Unfortunately, Knox ambushes here waiting for Paul. Then, Paul is shot in the shoulder. Knox haughtily points the gun at Paul and provokes him. But right after that, Paul expeditiously retrieves a rifle and shoots Knox dead. After that, the police arrive at Paul's house. They determine that Paul was acting in self-defense. The police chief also discovered that the culprit in the recent shooting was Paul. However, he doesn't arrest Paul but helps him hide it. From then on, Paul and his daughter return to normal life. Months later, Paul takes Jordan to NYU. He spots a man stealing a bag. Paul calls out to him and points at him with a finger gun.